The center is about education, not training. It's not about exams. Some educational systems in the world today, many in fact, they train people to pass exams. But that's not education, that's training. And education is helping people learn how to think for themselves in the broadest circumstances, in any circumstance, that they can think. Some student loses their father, and where do they go for solace? They're back in university a few days after the funeral. What do? Do they get into alcohol, drugs, Netflix? I mean, where do they go for? Do they blot it out, or do they face it head on? They deal with these things head on. Death is a fact of life. You have to own it. Suffering is a reality that you have to own. But it's just, we have that vision sometimes. We look at the other, and everyone who's from the south of Ireland is a Catholic, or in Indian terms, everyone in Pakistan is a Muslim.
Yes.
And they're not. They're all individuals, and we have to see it like that. India has a very interesting philosophical take that needs to be studied. And this philosophical idea has influenced the whole of the East, through Buddhism into China and Japan, and then through Vaishnavism into Malaysia and Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos, and up into Bali and Fiji. So it's had a huge influence on the thinking, this kind of broad-mindedness.
Hi, welcome to the Mohua Show. My name is Mohua Chinappa, and I am an author, entrepreneur, and ex-housewife. This podcast is about everything from business to technology to arts to lifestyle, but done and spoken ईमानदारी से. Hi, in today's episode we have with us Shaunaka Rishi Das. He's the director of the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies, a distinguished institution at the forefront of Hindu education and research. With a background rooted in academia and spiritual leadership, Shaunaka has dedicated his career to bridging ancient wisdom with contemporary understanding. He's known for his profound insights into Hindu philosophy and culture, shaping discourse through scholarly publications, lectures, and innovative online courses. Shaunaka's leadership at the center emphasizes inclusivity, rigorous academic standards, making Hindu studies accessible and impactful globally. Welcome, Shaunaka, in today's episode, and I'm frightened that I might just get caught out for being a Hindu and not knowing enough.
That's not at all. Not at all. I'm sure you know much more than I do.
So can you share a brief overview of your background and how did you get involved in Hindu studies?
It was a bit of a journey. I'm from Ireland. I was brought up in Irish culture in a very small town in Ireland. Most towns are. And I was always interested in spirituality throughout my whole life. And in my early teenage years, started to go on a quest. And I read many books from many different traditions, including Krishnamurti and Baba Ram Das and various things. But being brought up a Catholic, a Christian, I wanted obviously to understand that better. And ironically, at the age of 18, I bumped into some Hare Krishna people who had just arrived in Ireland. There were 6 of them in the whole country. I checked them out. I was just fascinated that they were talking about the Christianity I was reading in the Bible, but they didn't call themselves Christians. And their tradition was older than Christianity, if you go back into the antecedents. And I was fascinated by that. So, and also the philosophical part of it was, we can talk about that later. But so I joined an ashram, and I lived in an ashram for 12 years. And in coming out of the ashram, I had in that time done a lot of interfaith work, working with people from other faiths, other traditions, other cultures. And I had a lot of contacts who were religious or academic. And that's how I ended up in the academic world.
Most people at that age are actually going out into pubs and drinking and, really taking care of broken hearts with girlfriends. What made you choose this sort of an experience at that age and make that your pivotal path? I'm extremely curious.
Yeah, it's very funny. It was only many years later that I realized that my path was strange. I thought it was normal. I mean, all my friends drank. I mean, Ireland is just famous for drinking. and alcoholism and priests, and sometimes it's the same person. And so I was just I'd go to the pub with my friends, but I never drank. It was I just never drank, so I was always a little different. My father gave me the choice at the age of 12. I should think about whether I wanted to drink or not, because you could become an alcoholic, and he had chosen not to drink, but he gave me the choice. And I chose not to drink, because he said that he didn't drink in case there was alcoholism in him. And he wanted to be a good husband, a good father, and a good citizen. And I thought the same. And I had two uncles. Two of his brothers were alcoholics, so there was some evidence. So so I made that choice, and then that was just a series of strange choices. At the same time, I wanted to be a normal, in inverted commas, a normal teenager, and I liked girls and all that, but I couldn't push it with my full heart. I also had this desire to find out about spirituality. I mean, if there is a God, then I should know, because then I should interact with God. I should work with God for the betterment of myself and everyone around me and the planet. And if there isn't, well, then I can do whatever the hell I like. So carte blanche. So it was important to find out for me. And in trying to find out, I was fascinated by the different cultures, the different ways of expression, the different ways of talking about this subject. But maybe most important was everyone was talking about this subject. There wasn't a single culture in the world that wasn't absorbed in this issue.
Of trying to look for God.
I'm trying to look for truth, for reality, for God. But so many names, so many different ways of approaching it. But so that was fascinating for me, and I found my home in the Bhakti traditions of India. So interestingly, when I joined the temple in Dublin, the ashram, I asked the president of the temple, I said, could I join to become a Christian? And he thought about it, and he said yes. And the next morning, when I went to the Mangal Arti in the temple in front of the shrine, there was a little picture of Jesus on the altar, which I thought was very, very kind of him, very, very broad-minded. So
that's wonderful. My God. I mean, this is quite a journey. This is like, maybe there's some really, as they say in Hinduism, that there is a karmic connection to our land. And that's how, Shaunaka, you were absolutely fascinated with the Bhakti movement. And so I am going to ask you a whole lot of other questions after this. This is the most interesting podcast I think I've done in a really, really long time. As the director, what are your primary responsibilities at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies?
well, the center, it's a center for Hindu studies. It's not a Hindu center.
Okay.
So my primary responsibility, as I see it, is to maintain the integrity, the academic integrity of the center, that it's not in any way sectarian or political, so that it really is a center for the study of a subject, the critical analysis of a subject, that you can really delve into it. You can ask all the intelligent questions that need to be asked, so that you can really tease out what are the issues. And it's not veering towards sectarianism, or it's not influenced by sectarianism, or veering towards politics or influenced by politics. So it's that tightrope has been,
of academics.
I think, keeping that, and also keeping a certain ethos. The center is about education, not training. It's not about exams. Some educational systems in the world today, many in fact, they train people to pass exams, but that's not education, that's training. And education is helping people learn how to think for themselves in the broadest circumstances, in any circumstance, that they can think through. They have the skills and the confidence and the ability to analyze and articulate, and that ethos of education, that's extremely important to us.
It's a very, very deep subject, and you're so right that it is not about the exams. It's about inculcating that as your life, as your lifestyle. So you are the first Hindu chaplain to Oxford University in its 800-year history. What does the role entail? Just for our listeners, I'm very fascinated, Shaunaka. I need to know, what does it entail?
Well, a chaplaincy is a function of a Christian priest. So the Queen has a chaplain, the House of Parliament has a chaplain, colleges have chaplains, and these are spiritual spiritual directors, spiritual ministers. They're there to give spiritual support. And so it's just a term that's used. There are 38 colleges in Oxford. Nearly all of them have a chaplain, a Church of England chaplain, and Catholic chaplains and Jewish chaplains. But there were no Hindu chaplains to offer spiritual support for the Hindu students, the Hindu staff members, etc. And also Jain students would come to me and ask for help. Sikh students would come. And I just gave it. And then eventually at some point, someone asked me if I would be the chaplain. And I thought, well, yeah, okay, if you want to give me a name, fair enough. But then what I didn't realize at the time, that wasn't just about students. The university has 5 hospitals and 2 hospices. So then I started to get telephone calls from the hospital. And that's very serious. That's life and death issues. So it's about giving spiritual guidance, spiritual help. I was surprised, I must say, just at the level of the students, at some of the difficulties some students were facing. I mean, it wasn't simply dietary issues in their colleges, which are important to them but are easy to deal with. Accommodation issues. Sometimes they need special cooking facilities. If they're a Jain, for instance, they have a very strict diet, or a Vaishnava or some Shaivites. But also, some people had been abused in their homes sexually. And now we're starting to work through it as they were away from home for the first time and begin wanting to talk to someone about it. And that's a difficult conversation to have with someone. So there are all kinds of issues that you have to tease out and try and give them some spiritual perspective, some way of seeing this event in broader terms, which really can help people deal with the issues of life much more holistically. Otherwise, some student loses their father, and where do they go for solace? They're back in university a few days after the funeral. What do? Do they get into alcohol, drugs, Netflix? I mean, where do they go for? Do they blot it out, or do they face it head on? And certainly all the Indian traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, they deal with these things head on. Death is a fact of life. You have to own it. Suffering is a reality that you have to own. So it's helping give that perspective to students so that they can carry on with their life holistically. It's also, I consider it to be part of education. A holistic educational model has that part, because there is that part of people and people yearn for it. So we need to make sure that they have that balance in their life.
My God, I can go on and on listening to you, Shaunaka. This is like, yes, it's beautiful. You've also been actively involved in interfaith and comparative theological dialogue. Can you share some of your experiences in this area?
Well, I suppose that started for me when I was a young Hare Krishna person. I was sent to Northern Ireland to start the first Hindu temple in Northern Ireland. And this was at a time in Northern Ireland when it was a war zone. So I arrived off a train from Dublin to Belfast in saffron robes and a shaven head with a little Sika. And I got out of the station, and I didn't know whether to turn right or left for the city centre. I didn't know where I was in one sense. So I asked the man, I said, sorry, which way to the city centre? And he looked at me and he said, "Are you Taig?" I didn't understand him. We lived in the same island, but I didn't understand his accent at all. And what he was saying was, "Are you a Taig?" Now, a Taig is a very derogatory term for a Southern Irish Catholic. Now, I was standing before him in a dhoti and kurta and shaved head. I mean, why did he think like that? And he was only thinking like that because I just got off the Dublin train and I had a Southern Irish accent. So all he saw before him was a Catholic. He was a Protestant. This was the opposite side. And I couldn't understand what he was talking about. Then he said, "Are you a Fenian?" And a Fenian was a a 19th century Irish Republican. So at least he was in a time scale that I could begin to appreciate. I looked at him, I couldn't even answer the question. It was such a silly question. And then he said, "Are you from the Free State?" Now, the Free State is what the Republic of Ireland was called in the 1920s, the time of my grandfather. And I thought, yeah, okay, so we're in the 20th century. Okay, I get it. But I was totally, he just looked at me and said, "Go home, Sonny, go home." And that was my introduction to Northern Ireland and the need for interreligious dialogue, for people not to see in such sectarian terms, to dismiss people just because they think they're of this religion or that religion. I couldn't have looked more different. I couldn't have done more to change my appearance in an Irish context. And he still saw me just as, it wasn't that I was a Hindu. He was trying to figure out if I was a Catholic Hindu or a Protestant Hindu. So such a limited vision.
Sorry, but this is really funny when you say Catholic Hindu or a Protestant Hindu.
Oh, it is. But it's just, we have that vision sometimes. We look at the other and, everyone who's from the south of Ireland is a Catholic, or in Indian terms, everyone in Pakistan is a Muslim.
Yes.
And they're not. They're all individuals. And we have to see it like that. And that was one of the beauties of working with Indian philosophy, where you talk about the idea of Atma, and the Atman, the idea of Samadarshana, as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, where the humble sage sees with equal vision the Brahmana, the dog eater, he's called, it's just the lowest of society in those terms. The elephant, every living being is seen with equal vision. So how could we be so discriminatory? So that was the new way that I was thinking when I was engaging with this person. But that also helped me have a compassionate feeling towards that person. I didn't resent that person for being ignorant. It was just that ignorance was simply lack of knowledge. He actually didn't know any better. According to what he knew, this was real, where I had been given more knowledge, and I could see that, no, this isn't real. We have to see each other as individuals. And that's what spurred me on in interreligious dialogue, to consciously go out of my way to meet people of other religions, to understand them, to appreciate them, to have relationships with them.
I'm going to ask you a very tricky question. And how do you compare Hinduism with other religious traditions, and how do you bridge the gap and foster an understanding, of the religious traditions?
Well, I mean, for me personally, Hindu culture is, and many of the Indian cultures share a common philosophical basis. But the Hindu culture is very pluralist. It's been known for that in the West. Greek philosophers spoke about that. Plato gave a kind of a backhanded compliment that admitted that maybe India has something. He wasn't very complimentary, but he had to admit there's something there. Vasco da Gama, Marco Polo, everyone who encountered India, they realized it has this pluralism where religions get on with each other somehow or other. This all obviously conflict all the time, but it's just not the same as they were experiencing in their culture.
Yes.
So that idea of the Atman was revolutionary for me. That really, really helped. So India has a very interesting philosophical take that needs to be studied. And this philosophical idea has influenced the whole of the East, through Buddhism into China and Japan, and then through Vaishnavism into Malaysia and Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos, and up into Bali and Fiji. So it's had a huge influence on the thinking, this kind of broad-mindedness. So this was a real difference. But then when I look into other traditions, I also see truth there. And I see when people understand that truth, how they practice. And they practice as sadhus. So there are sadhus within these traditions as well. They have their holy people who are very enlightened. So they're the people I like to talk to. And I meet many Hindus who aren't enlightened, many Christians who aren't enlightened, many Jews who aren't enlightened. But it's when you meet the enlightened ones of any tradition that you can really have a dialogue and really speak about what the issues are. And so we all have our unenlightened moments, and sometimes those moments can be very long. But in the Bhagavad Purana, there's a very interesting discussion about stages of development of faith, and it talks about the Kanishta, the neophyte, someone who's just found religion or spirituality, and they grab onto it, to a guru, to a temple, an ashram, a shastra, and then everything is about that. And the other temple down the road, that's not real. This is real. And the church, well, that's not real. This is real. So we all, in the beginning stage, we don't know very much.
Yeah,
So we
myopic about it.
We grab onto the little we have, and anyone who argues with it, we fight them, and we take our book and we beat them on the head with it, and they beat us on the head with their book. That's the Kanishta stage. We find it in every religion. But the Madhyam stage, the middle stage, is when you have real realization. You have read the text, you have understood it, you've associated with enlightened people within your tradition. And then you begin to see them in other traditions. So you see that there's the idea of God, the idea of the devotee of God, but that person isn't just in your own temple. They're also in the mosque and the church and the synagogue and in so many other temples and ashrams. And then there's people who don't have a lot of knowledge, and you interact with them to help them. So I just find these discussions, how they're developed in Hindu traditions, are extraordinary. It's just very sad. So I think Hinduism has a lot to offer, a global discourse about these things. I just think it's very sad when I see Hindus being triumphalist about that, and saying, we have the way, this is the way to understand, it's all one, and Christians are really Hindus. And it's like, oh God. That's just creating barriers. That just creates religious divide. But it's understandable. It's an understandable triumphalism, but it is at the Kanishta stage. If we use the Hindu understanding of how these things work, we can analyze it fairly well.
How does the Bhagavad Gita continue to resonate with people today, both within and outside Hinduism? There are so many people who really resonate with some of the principles and the theories. What, according to you, Shaunaka, are some of the philosophies that can be used as a blanket across all religions?
Well, so one thing about the Bhagavad Gita, if we examine Krishna's teaching method, so the Bhagavad Gita means the song of God. So in the text, Krishna is God. So you could say, why is he having a dialogue with Arjuna? Why doesn't he just tell him what to do? Arjuna has a nervous breakdown. He says, I can't do it. I can't go on. I should go off to the Himalayas. It's too much. And his reasons are very good. They're very religious and pious. And you think, yes, war is bad. Everything is bad. But Krishna has a dialogue with him. As God, he could just say, here's what you do, Arjuna. Do this, do this, do this. Do it now, boss. Go. And then done. Yeah, and then that would be the merciful thing to relieve him of his anxiety and his difficulty. But Krishna doesn't do that. He has a discussion with him, and he gives him all kinds of options of the things that he could do. And the very first option he gives him, he says, if you don't do this, people will think you're a eunuch. They'll just laugh at you. You're a warrior that left the battlefield. How bad is that? Now that's a very materialistic, egotistical reason to do anything. So he gives him a completely ridiculous reason in one sense. And Arjuna doesn't even Arjuna just doesn't even engage with that. Arjuna asks a lot of questions during the Gita, but he doesn't engage with that at all. And Krishna continues to give him reasons. And in chapter 6, he talks about dhyana yoga. He talks about sitting down in the lotus position and meditating and controlling the mind. And Arjuna says, I can't do that. Controlling the mind is like controlling the wind. He's a Kshatriya. Can you imagine with his big biceps sitting down pretending to be a yogi? But Krishna's laughing at him because that's what Arjuna said he wanted to do at the beginning when he was going to walk away from the battlefield. I'll go and be a yogi. And now Arjuna himself is saying, no, I can't do that. So then he goes up to the very end, and Krishna lets Arjuna know what he thinks he should do. But in the end, he says, deliberate on what I have said fully, and then do what you wish to do. And he uses the word icha, do as you desire. And that means it's not a dogmatic text. It's not doctrinaire. He's not telling him. He's giving him choice. And because he gives him choice, Arjuna can choose to love, because love is based on choice. So why does he fight? He doesn't fight because of religion or dharma, or he doesn't fight because of yoga or jnana. He fights because of his affection for Krishna. He wants to please him. And that's, and so just that whole example. Now let's make that practical. You have a teenage daughter, and she says that she wants to go out clubbing and then stay overnight with her friends. So you're thinking, oh my God, what does that mean? That means she's going to be offered alcohol and drugs and maybe sex, and oh God, what this is, I can't let my daughter out. And then, but society says that these days you have to do this. So what do? You get your child in front of you and you say, okay, you're going to go out, but you're going to ring me at 11 o'clock. And then the parents in the house are going to ring me to say that you're there, and all these strictures. And you're not going to drink, you're not going to smoke, you're not going to have drugs, and you all this stuff, right? But that's not what Krishna does. Isn't it interesting how Krishna does it? So if Krishna was doing it, he'd say to her, what do you know about alcohol? And then they'd have a talk about alcohol. And then she's taught about it. And then when she gets there and someone offers her alcohol and she thinks, oh, sorry, yeah, no, I've thought about that. No, that's not a good. Or someone offers her drug. Here, try this. What is it? It doesn't matter. It's good. But she says, no, it does matter because I thought about it. And that makes a huge difference, that she knows she has choice. So Krishna's teaching method is absolutely current in terms of teaching, but also counseling and even negotiating. That goes into the education space, it goes into the family space, it goes into the corporate space. Just that one example of just how he discusses things with Arjuna we're not even talking about his teachings.
Tell me a personal, pivotal moment of teaching from the Bhagavad Gita that has impacted you. Your personal space that you think is close to your heart.
There's so many. The Gita is full of gems. I suppose one that I keep coming back to is chapter 10, text 10. This is one of what they call the bij mantras, the seed mantras of the Gita. And it says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam dadami buddhayogam tam yena mamopariyante. It says, to those who are constantly devoted and who worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And I really like that because, so to those who are constantly devoted, it's not something you do on Sunday or Friday or Saturday afternoons. It's just your life. It's how you conduct yourself. And who worship me with love, and that's what love is. It's constant. If it's love, you just do it all the time. I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And what he's saying is, it doesn't matter what your sampradaya is, or if you do or don't have a sampradaya. It doesn't matter if you do or don't have a guru. It doesn't matter if you do or don't attend a temple. He says, if you act like this, I will take care of everything for you. I will make the way clear. And in the next verse, text 11, he starts it by saying, Tatad evanukampartam. And what the verse goes on to say is, I will enlighten them, and with that enlightenment dispel the darkness. And it's always translated, evanukampartam is translated by my mercy. But actually, another translation of the word is, I will tremble with you. And that's a beautiful...
Oh my God, that is so beautiful. I will tremble with you.
Of God. And when do we tremble? We tremble when we're afraid. And Krishna will be there and he will tremble with us. He'll be with us the whole time. We also tremble when we're full of joy. He will be with us always. So those two verses, you asked for one, I've given two.
You just got me so emotional with this one, saying that I will tremble with you. This is beautiful. Well, I'm going to ask you a little bit about Tantra. It's been considered as immoral, superstitious. A lot of people associate sex with Tantra, and I don't think they go beyond the, level of at a very superficial level. And that this is, it's highly spiritual. It has so much of potential and liberation. And there are a lot of saints in India who have been tantrics, they've worshipped the Tantra. So how do you think the study of Tantra has evolved over time? It's still very, very, it's still very nascent among many Hindus. Most people just know this as a word, but they don't know too much about it because there is death involved in this. There is the, where the burning is done for the bodies. So all of that seems so dark, for people, for a common man to understand. So can you just share with us a little bit there, Shaunaka?
I think Tantra is, when people discuss Tantra, they discuss it like they're a salacious tabloid. That's the only discussion I ever hear about it. It's about sexuality or skulls, or as you say, you go to the dark. But anyone who's ever been to a temple and done a puja is engaged in Tantra. Every temple puja process, the whole Pancharatra system, a Vaikanasa system, they're all tantric. So Tantra has pervaded Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism since time immemorial, and we have no idea where it comes from. so it's whole mystical processes of how do you purify yourself, how do you engage yourself with the pure, which is the supreme, how do you create those pathways. So all the rules of purification, of ritual purification and performance that we know in the undark aspects of the traditions, they're all tantric as well. So Tantra, the study of Tantra is the study of puja, of temple worship, of the worship of the Murti, of the Pran-Pratishtha. All of this is all tantric. So it's the dark stuff is the dark stuff, and in every religious tradition you'll have all kinds of opinions and shades and denominations, all off doing their thing. So when I go to some parts of Nepal and they're sacrificing, a whole host of animals and buffaloes and goats, and for me it's horrific, But in our center we study it. We have a center in Nepal, in Kathmandu, where we do this study. We're just about to start. Just next month we'll have a summer school there. So it's all important and worthy of study. Just because I don't personally adhere to it, but at the same time I do puja in my own home. So I'm doing tantra as well as they're doing tantra. So it does require a lot more study for people to really engage with it, rather than just dismiss it as a puerile thing that you see in the headlines of a disreputable tabloid. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the online courses that's offered by the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies.
Well, we've developed those courses over a period of about 15 years. We have 44, I think, offering at the moment. We started them because people were approaching us and saying, well, I can't come to Oxford to study, so how are you going to take care of me? So we responded to that. So we did in-person classes, and then when online came, very early on, 2009, we started to do online courses. And we've developed them. We've kept them cost effective to be as accessible as possible. They cover Shastra, they cover yoga, they cover introductions to Hinduism. We have a number on the Bhagavad Gita. We have a very good course on the Mahabharata, course on Dharma, yoga philosophy. It's quite comprehensive. And also on Hindu music, on Hindu temples and architecture. So it's very broad. Yeah.
It's very comprehensive. And how long are these courses? What's the duration?
They last about 8 weeks. But the thing about but once you sign up to them, you're signed up for 3 months. So you can take them at whatever rate you can. You can tune in at 12 midnight or 12 midday. It's because it's just online.
Okay.
There are videos to download, audio, so you can take it with you. And there are forums, so you can interact with the tutors. And the tutors are really excellent, and the forums are actually very good as well. So it's interactive in that sense.
So what do you think the students are going to really, what would be the impact if they were to sign up for these courses, Shaunaka?
Well, it's very interesting. Our student retention rate is very high. So people do one course, then they do another and another and another, and they just keep on going. And every time we do a new course, it's just flooded with people who've done all the other courses. So people are definitely having a good educational experience. A number of people, about 6 to date, have actually used those courses for credits to get into other courses in Australia, in North America, and different places. And then a number of students on those courses have actually come up to Oxford and signed up to Oxford University courses with the centre and gone on to do PhDs, or as they call it in Oxford, a DPhil, a Doctorate of Philosophy. Oxford just has to be sound a little special, you know.
Of course it does. You can't deny that.
What can
What
you do?
challenges do you face in promoting Hindu studies, and how did you ever overcome them? If you did you?
Well, there's challenges to everything we do. There's challenges to getting out of bed in the morning. So,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
yeah. And so, how do we face challenges? I suppose the two, and I don't want to overemphasize this because, in fact, we've had, on the most part, tremendous support. But the first challenges were scholars who didn't think that there was a need for Hindu studies, who didn't think it was feasible to do Hindu studies, um, uh, because it had never been done before. This was the first academic center of this level in the world. So, when you introduce something like that, there's always resistance. And from people who've developed a field and then they think you're muscling in on their field, totally understandable. So we understood that and we let it. But it's interesting that the scholars who did object then years later engaged with the center. And it wasn't an issue. It became not an issue at all. So we met that challenge just by understanding we had to establish our academic integrity, and we were going to be scrutinized more than other centers because we're new and then somehow suspicious. So we really did. So our students, they learned Sanskrit, they learned Bengali and Tamil and various languages to study their subject, but they also studied Christianity and Islam and other traditions. So they had to do twice as much to get the full picture so that they could engage holistically in the academy. We realized that was going to be the challenge, but we met the challenge, we developed the integrity, and we have established the global benchmark for Hindu studies in the academy. So that's how we met that challenge. It took a good 20 years, but that's what it takes. I like gardening. So in gardening, you plant a tree and it takes a long time to grow, and you let it grow. So it's the sattvic approach. And then the other challenges we met were from certain aspects of the Hindu community. And again, I don't want to overemphasize this because on the whole, it's been very supportive. But some in the Hindu community saw this as kind of more Westerners coming to tell us who we are and what to do and all that kind of stuff. So, and it was a real minority. And again, it was just a matter of lasting the course and showing them that, no, that's not the case. We have practicing Hindus studying here, lecturing here. So we have practicing Hindus supervising the DPhil, the Oxford DPhil of practicing Hindus. And in the field of Hinduism, that's the first time in history that's ever happened, and it's very credible. I mean, these people are excellent in what they do. So again, we just had to last the course to do that, and just ignore that kind of approach.
Conversations.
Yeah, and especially when I think that the IPC has now taken over the field of cricket. And not only that, but it's commercialized it in a way that the British Isles would never have imagined. So you can't start talking to me about appropriating Hinduism and colonizing Hinduism when India is doing the same thing to English cricket. I don't think England realizes this yet. But then another aspect of this is something that you mentioned at the start. If we look at this from a Hindu point of view, who was I in my last life? So I'm a white guy, I'm a Gora in this life. But who was I in my last life? Was I a South Indian Brahmin? Was I born specifically for this? Is this part of a bigger play that is actually for the betterment of Hinduism? A Hindu has to also take that into account. So we can't ever be dismissive.
Not at all. I completely agree that you were born, to take this on as your, next life play. I totally believe that. I haven't met anybody as passionate as you. And it's fantastic. So, what advice would you like to give aspiring scholars or educators who are interested in pursuing a career in Hindu studies? What would you like to tell them?
I think this is an area of growth.
Okay.
The UGC, the University Grants Commission in India, has now mandated, based on the education policy of 2020, that this is an area where higher education institutions have to begin to develop Hindu studies, Ayush, etc. So we've been asked by a growing number of Indian institutions, universities, to help them develop the field in India, which we're very happy to do. And so I see within a generation, certainly 2 generations, that there will be, that the gravity of development of Hindu studies will not be in Oxford, it will be in India, where it should be. There hasn't been Hindu studies in India for 80 years because of educational policy. And I think that's been a mistake. So we can help that. We can help bring people to Oxford, train them, educate them, send them back as teachers, as students, and then just kickstart this whole thing. And because it's Oxford, Oxford has the best educational karma for whatever reason. So that umbilical link will help everybody in this. So this is a growth area. So students, yes, take this seriously. If you're attracted to this area of study, then take it seriously. There's a place you can go in Oxford, and we will be developing places in India. And developing these places means developing careers. And it won't be only in state universities, it will be in private universities. This is going to become a growth area in the academy in India. And I think an area that will branch out internationally as well. It is branching out internationally. So I think if you feel like this is the subject you want to study, then study it. Don't think about your career. Think about your passion. Go with your passion. The career will come. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
The career will definitely come. But go, if you want undergraduate education, go with your passion.
Agree with you fully. How would you like to be remembered in the context of Hindu studies and interfaith dialogue? What legacy do you hope to leave behind, Shaunaka?
Oh, well, setting aside how I want to be remembered, because that's a real rabbit hole, going down and thinking about how you want to be remembered. So setting things up for the future, that's a waste of time. I just think, by developing an educational foundation at such a high level with such integrity, that's enough. That's the basis of the future of education in the field. And because it's developed in Oxford, it's solid, absolutely solid. We've just bought a property, our first property, to my understanding, will be the first purpose-built center for Hindu studies in the world. So by establishing that is the legacy. Whether my name is associated with it or not is absolutely immaterial. I think it's just the fact that has happened and that students have access to it and can flourish because of it. That means the subject is now real and it will have an impact in the future. It will have an impact not only in education, but it will have an impact on the environment. It will have an impact on social studies, on the social development of India, issues to do with caste and gender. And it will also have an impact on executive decision making at a governmental level. They're the areas where I see that this subject area is already influencing and will influence a lot more in the future. It will help make India a global player at a very high level, culturally and intellectually, where it's not a player at the moment.
Shaunaka, before I end this podcast, I can go on and on. I just need to ask you, how did your family take to it when you changed your name?
Well, it was, yeah, it was funny. Obviously, in the 1970s, for a young Irish Catholic boy to go off and become a Hindu was a very strange thing. There was hardly any Indians in the country. There were no black people in the country, hardly. So this was a very white Christian country. I made a very radical decision. Now, I didn't realize at the time I was 18 years old. 18-year-olds think they know everything, obviously. So I thought this is perfectly normal and natural. my father had passed away when I was 15, but he had blessed me on his deathbed. He had told me, find principles that really mean something to you and follow them all your life, and then you can respect yourself. And if you can respect yourself, other people can respect you. And that was such good advice. It was so broad. And I found those principles, and this is just where I happened to find them. And my mother didn't understand that journey, so it was difficult for her. My brothers and sisters thought it was, I only found this out years later. They thought it was extraordinary that I'd done this, but they were actually, they approved. And two of my brothers got involved in Hinduism to some extent as well, and a lot of the family became vegetarian. But I sorted things out with my mother in time. It just took her a little time. Obviously, her issues were, what will the rest of the family think? She had 5 sisters and all their children, and a big extended family, just like in India. The issues are, what about the family, etc. And I had just walked out of that, so I came back in to help her sort it out.
That's a very, very brave move, Shaunaka. It requires courage, and at 18, I mean, I'm fascinated with your journey. How did you even get down to recognizing your calling? I mean, people just spend their entire lives and they still can't find their calling, and here you are at such a young age when most boys, like I said, are going from one pub to the other. You're pursuing a spiritual process and a spiritual path. Extraordinary, Shaunaka Rishi Das. Thank you so much for being on today's podcast. And it was an absolute honor for me to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Mohua. Thank you very much indeed. You're very kind.
To you, our dearest listeners, you can find us on your favorite streaming services, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and of course on all other major streaming services. With loads of love, we are The Mohua Show, where we talk ईमानदारी से।